Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on how Salesforce uses Agentforce to deliver customer success. I'm Laura Ambrose from the customer success team here at Salesforce, and I'll be guiding you through today's session. So thank you all so much for being here and taking the time out of your busy day to learn about the biggest transformation that's happening to Salesforce in the past 25 years. Now, super quick reminder that Salesforce is a publicly traded company, so any purchasing decisions you make should be based on what is currently available. Now, let me introduce you to our speakers. We have Jim Roth, President of Salesforce Customer Success, and Emily Winslow, Director of AI Programs within Salesforce Customer Success. Both Jim and Emily, supported by their teams, have been working incredibly hard over the past few months to bring to life what we call Agentforce Customer Zero. Jim, can you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Laura. It's great to be here. My name's Jim Roth. I am a transplant from Chicago. I now live in Austin, although today Austin feels a bit like Chicago, I would have to say. I have 4 kids with 2 birthdays, which is hard to do. I'll leave it up to you to figure out the permutations there. And I've been at Salesforce now for 5 years. Before that, I was 17 years at Dell. Super excited to be here today. And as you said, we have been working really hard on Agentforce since the launch at Dreamforce.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. And Emily, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, please?
Yes, of course. It's great to be here. So Emily Winslow, I lead our AI programs team. We're the team who's responsible for Agentforce implementation on help. I live in a pretty small island between Seattle, Washington, and Victoria, BC. 2 kids with 2 different birthdays, so the typical math. And before my time at Salesforce, I spent about a decade at early stage startups. So big transition from the tiny company to the big company, but happy to be here.
Wonderful. We're so honored to have you both here today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Jim, to walk us through the Salesforce customer service journey.
Thanks so much, Laura. Again, really excited to be here. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And like Laura said, we're going to share how Agentforce is helping us take our easy and expert experiences to the next level for our customers. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of context. This is how we think about delivering great service at Salesforce. We think about these words easy and expert. And we define easy as low effort and high speed. And we define expert as product depth and user context. So keep that in mind as we go through this today. And this is the 2x2 that we really use every day to think about our experiences. And to orient you on this, the x-axis is the continuum from self-service to assisted service. The y-axis, the continuum from proactive to reactive. So that kind of makes sense. And we think about this just like all of you do, that we have different experiences that fall into these different quadrants. And if we go on to the next slide, you'll see all the different experiences that we have that make up this 2x2 matrix. There's things in there like in the reactive assisted quadrant, we certainly have all of our contact channels, traditional contact center, inbound volume. In the bottom left, you see all of our self-service properties, including Agentforce, which we're obviously going to talk more about today, and the help portal. And then on the top of this, you see all of the proactive channels that we want to do more and more of. And I think like all of you in the service industry, we all aspire to be more and more proactive. And we think Agentforce is a big unlock to allow each of us to be more proactive in all of our journeys. That's what it's really all about, delivering even better customer service for our customers. Now, one of the things I would say that is core to the middle of this is Data Cloud. You have to have your data connected across all these quadrants to deliver great service. And obviously data, as we all know, is the foundation of AI. And so our Data Cloud work, tying all the data together across our experience has been really critical for our journey with Agentforce. And so what I want to start with is a couple polling questions. The first one I want to ask is, at what stage is your company in its AI journey? And there's 4 choices here. Are you planning, defining use cases and success metrics? Are you building, testing and refining? C, are you launching? Or D, have you not started yet? So we'll give you a minute to respond to those questions, and then we'll take a look at the results live here so everybody can see. All right, let's take a look at the results there. So this shows that the majority of you either are in the planning phases where you're kind of looking for use cases, or your journey hasn't started yet. And that's not surprising. I think a lot of us have run different experiments to try to find these use cases. There are certainly people above us in our organizations, maybe it's your boss or the board, that are really pushing us to say, when can we have an AI use case that we can talk about publicly or with our investors? And so this is pretty natural for everybody to be in this spot. Let's do one more polling question before we move forward. I want to click a little bit more into what are the use cases that people are really exploring. So are you looking for internal use cases where AI is helping your employees, external where AI is helping your customers directly? C, are you looking at both, or you're not really exploring AI yet? So let's give it a minute. We'll see the results of this, and then we'll move on. I'm really curious to see what the results of this one show. Interesting. So that's great. People are exploring both internal and external. And that's what we're doing at Salesforce as well. We've definitely got a mix of internal and external use cases. That's not surprising either. There are certainly benefits for all of your users, whether they're employee users or customer users. So that's great to see. 64%. Awesome. Okay. Now let's get into kind of what AI and Agentforce means for service. I've been reflecting on this one a lot, and I think about it that every 30 years there's been a technology disruption that comes into service and dramatically disrupts the industry. Now, this trend could have continued back prior to the 1960s, but I'm not quite that old, so I'm just going to start this in the 1960s. Obviously, before the 1960s, there's always been face-to-face service since the beginning of time, but in the 60s was really when teleservice kind of rose. And the rise of the call center. And that led to a better experience for customers who were able to quickly get answers from customers with fast response, 24/7, without having to get in their car or walk down the street to go see their service provider. Now, I know most people don't wake up wanting to call a call center today in 2025, but back in the 60s, it definitely was a huge step forward. Then in the 90s, we saw the web become hugely popular, and that introduced another option for easy self-service on the web. We're all very familiar with that. And I think most of us today prefer that over teleservice when we can. And what we believe is that in the 2020s is really when we started this next era of service that we call the agent service era. And we're really in the early innings of that. But what's really interesting about the agent service era is, unlike the past two eras where certainly the other eras, the tech innovation drove lower cost to serve and a better reactive customer experience, we believe that the agent service era is going to shepherd in the dawn of better proactive experiences and really pervasive proactive experiences because of the scaling capabilities that agent provides. And this really leads us to our first question, which is, what if workforces had no limits? And when I see this question, especially when it's as cold as it is in most of the United States today, I flash back to undergrad economics at Northwestern. The cold part was definitely Northwestern in January, walking to class. And my professor, Mark Whitty, my favorite professor of all time, made us draw these graphs of supply and demand. And the curves on those graphs would shift based on different things that were going on in the market. And I think about this all the time from a micro level, that what agents are doing is shifting the labor curve, the supply curve, kind of off the graph, literally. It means it's shifting it to the farthest edges of the graph. And it means there's kind of no supply curve for labor. There's just demand. And we all feel this because I would say that in most service teams that I know about or speak to, we're all kind of constrained by cost. We don't have enough money or budget or heads to go deliver service the way we really want to. And that's okay. That's the right role for service in our companies. But if we had a workforce with no limits, we could be proactive. We could reach out to customers to do check-ins. We could ask them how things were going based on data that we're seeing on our end, whether that's telemetry data from our products or whether it's other signals in the customer experience. I think that is why this is such an amazing opportunity. Certainly there's an opportunity here to scale our costs, but I get really excited, as I think most service people do, about what we can do for the customer experience. It's just kind of amazing. So, just to kind of set this up a little bit more, we are definitely living in the future. And this is our view of kind of what adding an agentic layer on top of the customer 360 looks like. agents that can complement all of our employees, drive greater ROI, improve the employee experience for sure. And we've deployed, just like all of you that are experimenting with internal and external use cases, we've done both of those things. We have agents that we've deployed for sales coaching. We've deployed agents on Slack, and our HR teams are deploying agents. I'm gonna briefly go back to the framework I opened with, and then we're really gonna get into kind of Agentforce here at Salesforce. As we began implementing Agentforce across Salesforce, we noticed some shifts in this 2x2, and I think this is really kind of profound. That what we saw was this shift in the y-axis moving to the right. And the way to think about this is the surface area of self-service has increased dramatically when you deploy agents, because you're freeing up time for humans to focus on complex cases. And what that really means is that there's a bigger opportunity to be driven by self-service. And in some ways, interacting with an agent is just dealing with a different type of labor, digital labor. And so that's why we think there's this shift in the y-axis over to the right. Similarly, there's another shift that's going on in the x-axis, shifting it down. And this is what I alluded to earlier, where it gives us the opportunity to be more proactive. In a world where we're no longer constrained by a budget that says, hey, I can only afford to do so many customer touches, and I probably have to prioritize the reactive inbound volume from our customers, none of us probably have enough time to get to all the proactive touches that we could do if we really wanted to deliver a wow or white glove experience. But that's what Agentforce can do. And so we also think about this as shifting the x-axis down. And so when you think about this, you step back, the opportunity, the technology transformation, the technology disruption that comes with Agentforce is increasing the surface area for self-service and increasing the surface area for proactive service. Now, who doesn't want to be more proactive and provide better self-service? That's all of us in every industry around the globe. That's what Agentforce does. And it's finally delivering on that vision that we've all wanted to have when it comes to service. So now we're going to go into a little bit more of our specific use case. I want to start with our help portal. And here's a screenshot of what it used to look like. Note the used to look like prior to December 2nd. This is what it looked like. It looks like a lot of help portals that you've all seen. There's search, there's a lot of links to click on to browse content. And our help portal is full of incredible knowledge articles, help documentation, and more. But if I'm honest, it's a bit overwhelming of where do I go? You kind of have to choose your own adventure of how am I going to find the answer? And this is really where Agentforce comes in. We were able to transform our experience, and I want to show you a demo of that now. So I'm going to invite my partner, Emily, in here to give us a little bit of a glimpse into what this looks like. And we're going to go through a little bit of the demo. Now, you'll notice right off the gate when we pull this up here, sorry, it's just loading. I'll give it here a second. Hopefully everybody can see that now. That you'll notice it looks quite different. It's not quite as choose your own adventure. It's not as overwhelming. To be honest, it looks a lot like ChatGPT. If we've all played with ChatGPT, we know what that experience looks like. And it's simply asking this question, how can Agentforce help? Now, to show this a little bit more, I want to take a real life example of something that happened with one of our customers just last week. Now, this is a pretty complex question, and it relates to headless identity implementation. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. It's an advanced authentication use case, particularly for Experience Cloud, which is our portal product. And so we're going to go and enter that question in there to see what Agentforce does with it. And as you can see, it's a pretty complex scenario in question. It's related to off-core applications. And so the complexity of this question does, impact the time it takes for Agentforce to respond. But you can see, we've seen the response there. It's actually a pretty detailed response. Wow. But now I'll add, though, that the customer in the scenario that we're demoing here didn't stop there. They asked a follow-up question. So let's go ahead and try that too. And we'll see what that follow-up question looks like. Oh, and there's the answer to that. Wow, Agentforce is pretty fast this morning. Again, this is a really good answer, but the customer did not stop there. They needed even more help, so they asked one more question. And let's see what that looks like. It's still thinking there. Wow, good job, Agentforce. That response is incredible. an example URL that shows the customer the order and structure of the URL parameters. Just pretty amazing. Now, one of the things I want to show here is to look at the Agentforce side. Like, what did we have to do to get the agent to do and respond this way? So let's go ahead, Emily, and flip to that view. We've got that pulled up here now. And while Agentforce is capable of understanding those queries in natural language, there's a variety of instructions and guardrails that we put in place to help Agentforce understand their role at Salesforce. And we're going to talk later about tuning. When we talk about tuning, this is what we're really talking about tuning, these instructions and the guardrails. And so when you look at the instructions here, and these are global instructions that apply to all aspects of our agent, notice how they're written in natural language, and they describe how you want Agentforce to operate within your company parameters for things like your voice and your tone, your brand. This is where you can tailor the LLM to fit within your company parameters, rather than chatting with ChatGPT that doesn't have the context for how you want the conversation to be steered. So we'll keep scrolling down. This is also where we can guide Agentforce on the questions we don't want answered. That's what a guardrail defines. There's things here that, like we've done in our agent, like legal and pricing. Whenever we see a customer ask us a legal or pricing issue, we have a guardrail in place that says automatically get those types of questions over to a human. If the customer really wanted to, that's what would end up happening. So at this point, let's go back to the actual Agentforce, the customer view, and let's go see how that works. So let's just say that we wanted to leave that conversation and get to an available support engineer. Let's type in there that I want to talk to a human. Now, because this is live, we're reaching an actual support engineer here. So let's see, we'll give it some time to make sure it's coming up. This is going to one of our live contact centers around the world. Let's see. Give it just one more second here. Hopefully we've got a good response time coming. So it's routing here, it's looking at the case information. And one of the things that it's doing for the engineer is it's summarizing what is the summary of the conversation that's been happening so far with the agent. This is a really important capability because nobody likes to have to repeat information when they switch channels. This is kind of a channel switch. That's the way we think about it. You're going from our website and this agent experience to a live human experience. There we go. And in that, you want the human support engineer picking up this conversation to have the full context, and not have to say, please let me put you on hold while we review your notes, which we've all had that experience in service. So again, another angle of using an LLM to summarize the transcript, the conversation to date, so that when a support engineer picks up the case and the conversation, they can immediately add value and deliver service, and not just force the customer to kind of regurgitate information. So again, it's good there that we made sure that the customer knew that we were, this was just a demo for our webinar and not an actual customer. So we'll let the team go back to helping our real customers and not serving us in this demo. But I wanted everyone to see kind of what that was like. So on that note, I want to turn things back over to Emily, who's going to share a bit about success metrics. One of the questions we get a lot is, how do we measure this? What have we learned, given that we are really customer zero, kind of leading the way for the industry with Agentforce? What are some of the learnings that we've gathered since we first launched this back in October and launched this full screen experience back in December? So Emily, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim. Awesome. So like you just saw in that demo, this experience has been live for customers, and my team in particular is dedicated to understanding how is this experience performing. So when we think about just that performance as a whole, we use 3 buckets to basically look at all of the metrics associated with this experience and understand what the quality is for the customer. First, we look at how customers are engaging with Agentforce. This looks at things like initiation rates, the number of conversations in total, the average conversation turns, so how much we're going back and forth with Agentforce, and then ultimately also looking at the abandon rate. These help us quantify the experience and understand how many customers are engaging with Agentforce. Second is this big bucket of performance, and this is key for us. This focuses on the quality of the engagement. We strongly believe You cannot have good customer outcomes without a high quality experience. Things like latency, the amount of time it takes for that answer to come back, things like that transfer latency. Those are places where we see drop-offs when there's poor performance there, and this helps us understand that at scale. Now, one of the bigger pieces is the answer quality. For that knowledge action in particular, those first 3 turns you saw, we strongly feel that for a customer to be able to self-serve, to not need to go on to create a case, we need those answers to be relevant, well-structured, and accurate. We actually have an entire team within my product group that is dedicated to evaluating the answer quality of those responses that Agentforce comes back with. And then finally, it's looking at those outcomes. At the end of the day, we are a service organization and we need to make sure that our customers are having successful outcomes. That looks like resolution rate, how many of our conversations are resolved with Agentforce, that escalation rate, how often are customers asking to talk to a human, and then CSAT, which helps us quantify at a smaller scale. What is the overall sentiment? How much are customers aligning with this, and how much do they want to utilize it? Now, when we look at the actual performance, we look at a lot of metrics here, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed with this sheet. I'm going to draw your attention to 3 of the critical ones. Now, like I said, we've been on a journey as we've gotten Agentforce live, and one of the big pillars of our program is to release Agentforce in flights. So we started with a pretty small subset of customers who this was available to and scaled from there. So you can see in those early dates in October, that total conversation number has moved dramatically. That first week, there was just 244 conversations. Now we're seeing about 54,000 in that same time frame. And one of the big important pieces of being able to scale in that way is understanding that resolution rate. And we've been hyper-focused on making sure as we scale that resolution rate is stable and improving. You can see that from those earlier time frames, we were around that 58%, and now we're up to 85. So as we've scaled, we've been able to tune and course correct in a way that gets customers better outcomes. And finally, that escalation rate. There is a need for customers to have access to humans. There are complex one-off cases that we do feel there's a big value in having that easy access to support engineers. But what we want to see ultimately is for a lot of the volume that we know Agentforce is capable of answering, that escalation rate comes down over time. And you can see that we are down to 1% from the 23% initially, and that's massive for our organization. So this is some of the ways that as that experience is live and we think to ourselves, okay, what kind of experience are customers having? This is a way that we're able to measure that. Now, like you guys, we've been on a journey with Agentforce. There was the preparing our data, there was understanding use cases, and then as we started to scale, there was understanding where do we need to course correct. So for those initial view, you can see that smaller screenshot, that previous help site experience, right? One of the key pieces we saw when we launched was that initiation rates were very low, sub 3%. And that just looks at how many customers saw that little tiny chatbot looking icon, opened up the experience, and started a conversation with Agentforce. Now, when we saw those really low initiation rates, we also paired that with understanding there are high quality outcomes when customers get into the experience. So our first order of operations was to redesign the entire UI of the experience to get more people into the experience itself. Hence that December 2nd release of the immersive homepage experience. And that, like Jim was saying, is that sort of ChatGPT-esque, really guiding customers into this experience itself. Now from there, once we had greater volume, we were understanding the outcomes at scale. Those outcomes, those resolution rates, the answer quality, things like that, gave us the confidence to then move all of that case creation type traffic through Agentforce. That was the removal of the contact support button. And we're able to do that because we have confidence in our measurement strategy. And that's one of the big key pieces that it's allowed our team to move quickly. Now, I want to spend just a little bit of time on some of our learnings. As a customer zero team, we are using fairly new technology and we're a big company. So there's some key learnings here that we want to share with you to kind of help you guys learn from what we did as we got this experience live. Now, the first piece is that agents need content. It might seem obvious, but we're a big enterprise company with a complex catalog of products and features which our content reflects. If any of you have used our help site, you know there's a lot of content out there. There's really no shortage. It's more or less trying to find the right content. And from years of trying to optimize this content for things like organic search, we've known that there's weaknesses in our catalog, things like outdated content or duplicate content. And so we had to be mindful of how this content would be reflected in Agentforce. So that was one of the big pieces of both making it available through Data Cloud, but also the typical content strategy work to make sure we're actually leveraging good content for Agentforce to utilize. Now, the other piece is the structured data side of it. Very quickly, we saw customers ask questions like, who is my account representative, or what is my org ID? Very quickly, we were realizing there's a lot of structured content here that they actually want to leverage through Agentforce. And that level of personalization is something we've worked towards building quite consistently now, because customers have come to expect a highly personalized experience. But in that, we've always wanted the Agentforce capabilities to be backed by humans. As Agentforce has grown in these capabilities, we've seen less and less escalations to support engineers, which is great. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of valid reasons why a customer would want to speak to a human at Salesforce, and we want to ensure that they're always a moment away. As Jim noted, one of the big pillars of that is that seamless transfer that you saw to the support engineer. Now, from their view, they're also being provided a summary of the conversation so that when that human picks up the thread, there's no context lost for the customer. And that's critical to make sure that really our human agents and our AI agents are working together as one team. The fourth piece I want to talk about is that incremental self-service resolution is our gold. Each week, we've been able to increase customers' access to Agentforce. You saw those conversation volumes scale. And that's one of those pieces that as we scale and those positive outcomes scale with it, we are able to help customers serve so much more effectively on their own, which is very important to us as a business. Now, the fifth one experience with many agents. Now, if you look at Agentforce today on help, you see this one seamless interface and one Agentforce. And that's how we've intended it to be. We want customers to feel familiar with this interface. We want UI patterns, instructions and tuning, voice and tone to all be the same. But behind the scenes, there are multiple agents powering this experience. And that will only grow in time. And I think many of you, as you go on this journey, will realize, oh, very quickly, we have multiple AI agents that are working together in tandem, but we do want that seamless experience for the customer. So it's a lot of how we leverage both the architecture of the technology with the interface and UI. And the last piece I'll talk about is the investing in ongoing tuning. So for us as a team, we did extensive testing prior to launch, looking at both answer quality and likely, engagements given the cases that we currently handle today. But what we also wanted to do was acknowledge the real world application and really closely monitor those early conversations that Agentforce was having and understand where we needed to course correct with things like our instructions, both at a global level and a topic level, so that we could help Agentforce acclimatize like any new employee to our ecosystem. Some of the complexities we saw is just around things like our competitors, how Agentforce talks about competitors, where we want to talk about integrations, what we want to handle and not handle. So we showcase those guardrails, right? There's questions about pricing we want a human to handle. There's questions about policy. So those are places where our team is working in those prompts every single week to fine-tune the experience and ultimately get Agentforce to a place where there's such a valuable member of our self-service motion. So that covers the learnings and I'll pass it back to Laura to cover the last bit before we get into Q&A.
So thank you both. It's been an incredible presentation, Jim and Emily. So thank you so much for that. I'm sure the audience has some questions that they would love to ask you both. So let's open it up to the Q&A. So For everyone on the call, if you haven't done so already, please do submit your questions through the Q&A box. We're eager to make sure that we hear what you want to say. So let's start with some questions that we have for Jim and Emily. Okay, so question number one. This is for you, Jim. So what is the most important success metric that you look at, and how do you measure it?
That's a great question. And Emily kind of alluded to it, that we really look at resolution rate, and kind of piecing together a few questions I've seen come in of kind of how do we measure resolution rate and how do we think about quality? I think that those are both kind of important. So the way we measure resolution rate today is we back into it. We look at the abandons, which are customers that engage with Agentforce and never ask a question. We subtract that out, and then we subtract out the customers that actually get to a live human. So it's kind of abandoned. Resolution is really total conversations minus abandons minus human escalations. Now, we recognize that's an imperfect way to measure it, because that could just be people that are frustrated and go away, not necessarily that they got their answer answered correctly, which is why quality of resolution is so important. And that's really where we're spending our time right now. Emily showed you the scorecard that showed a pretty significant ramp in volume. And when the volume was small, when it was 300 conversations a week, our team was manually reading through all the transcripts, and that's how we were determining quality. We still read through about that number of transcripts every week, but now we're doing, I mean, it was a little bit down on the holidays, but call it 45,000 conversations a week. We aren't staffed to read through all those manually, no differently than call centers aren't staffed to manually, listen to every call recording. And so we are going to lean on AI to develop a quality score. Over the holidays, we now have all of those transcripts. We're looking at those through AI. We're trying to score those transcripts. We're trying to look at sentiment. We're trying to understand what is the quality of those responses. We're trying to look at themes. What are themes of questions we see? Think of it as like call drivers in the call center world across our products. And so having all these transcripts, again, the transcript is the full transcript, the Agentforce part of the transcript, and then certainly any human part of the transcript, looking at those to score them. And we're working with our product team toward a model where we could actually get to kind of a quality score. You saw a placeholder there in our scorecard, so that we know kind of the agent and chat equivalent of CSAT just by leveraging AI. So we'd have it on 100% of the transactions, and that's how we would use AI to drive quality and further tune all of our prompts.
So thanks, Jim, for that through response. Emily, I think I've got a good one for you. So is Data Cloud required for Agentforce? Can you talk us through the benefits of using Agentforce with Data Cloud?
Yeah, definitely. So for us, we've been on a journey, kind of, as I mentioned, same with plenty of other customers, to move all of the content, structured and unstructured data that we want accessible to Agentforce into Data Cloud. Now, for us, one of the big benefits there is when you look at the content side of things, our content is complex, and I will say not well unified in metadata. So we have 12 different authoring teams. We surface content in 18 languages, and there's a lot of complexity around how you take that volume of content and build a retriever strategy that powers something like the knowledge object itself. So for us, that action, that knowledge action, has the capability, and we've scaled this over time, adding more and more content as we migrate it into Data Cloud, unify that metadata, and build a retriever strategy to utilize it. For us, having it in one centralized place is huge. As you can imagine, as a big company, there's a lot of authoring teams, there's a lot of structured data around the customizations and personalization that we want to do within Agentforce, and having it in a centralized place like Data Cloud both has all of the trust layer benefits, but also allows us to unify that beautifully through our retriever strategy to provide that really personalized experience for customers.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. So Jim, we received a question during the demo. We saw that your instructions had bullets and numbered lists. So how much content can a single instruction have before Agentforce gets confused? Is there any guidance on the maximum amount of instructions per agent?
Yeah, it's a good question. Emily, why don't you take that one? You'd have more of a perspective. She's the expert on the instructions, and we're, again, pushing the limits as customer zero. So I think we've tried to kind of load some up and have some different results.
Yeah, so you definitely can use structure within those instructions. So you saw the bulleted list, you saw quotes, you saw kind of all sorts of formatting in there. And it really is basically handing off written instructions like you would to a human. Now, in terms of limits, there are some limits around what level of both actions and instructions can live within one agent. Now, as I mentioned, our experience is powered by multiple agents from an architecture standpoint. So for us, from our long range perspective, we look at things around having an agent dedicated strictly to that knowledge seeking motion. That would include things like the knowledge action, but lots of global instructions around how you answer questions at the role level or layers of personalization. Now, we might also have something like a recommendations agent. And those two are going to work together in what is a very seamless UI, but there are limits, which is why you split them up. I think this is one of those pieces that it's helpful to have a kind of long-term perspective on what are the use cases we want to tackle and how might we sort of start. Maybe it's one agent and then we scale to two and then we add in a third as our use cases build. So for us, those instructions themselves, there are limits. They're more around the character count, so I'd have to look at them. We today break them into 12 global. There's 4 powering the knowledge action. There's things like our escalations, which is when Agentforce detects a customer is showing frustration. There's a set of 6 actions, instructions around how Agentforce is to deal with frustrated customers. So there's a lot of complexity within how you sort of look at those instructions, topics, things like that. But I would say it's really not that complicated to go into the agent builder and tweak things. That window that you saw that had those bulleted lists, I can simply type in there as I would send instructions to a human. I can save it. I can move over to my sort of planner mode. I can type in my query. I can look and see what instructions were used and tune from there. So the way that Agent Builder is built today, it's really intuitive to start tweaking those instructions and see what the change is. But ultimately, I would say there are limits in there, and that's why we choose a multiple agent strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even add it and tell a story. It was the Friday before Christmas, and in between wrapping presents, I was testing the help site. It's a true story. Emily can attest to this. And I typed in some questions where I was just looking for the phone number to call Salesforce, and I couldn't get it through the Agentforce prompt. And so I Slacked Emily, and the team literally that afternoon pushed into production some updates to the instructions that basically said if a customer is in the frustration action for escalations, let's make sure we get them the right phone number. And so it is literally that easy. But that's why the tuning is so important, and it's important to have a broad set of people banging on the agent to have different perspectives to tune it, whether that's executives or the team that's working on it, or we're actually now getting our entire population of support engineers, because after all, they are so familiar with the types of questions that customers ask. They're experts on our products. And so having them do testing is really valuable as well to see if the agent can respond to the questions in the right way. And so it really is a team sport to get everybody kind of constantly testing the agent so we can tune it and make it better and better and better. And that's the journey we've been on. As it gets better and better, we will put more volume through our agent.
Great. So you mentioned your team. So Jim, how big is your team that's dedicated to Agentforce?
Oh my gosh, it's a tricky question. Let me talk about the structure, and we can talk about the kind of relative size. So we have a team like Emily's team who are product managers. And we do think about this like a product. It's a productized experience. And so that's really important. The Emily and team are the ones setting the vision and the strategy, thinking about things like what are the next set of actions that we want to go at. I saw some questions in there around, hey, can Agentforce actually take action, or can it just respond to questions? Right now, it's just set up to respond to questions, but our full intent is to actually allow it to take actions. I think there were questions in there around password resets. All of those types of things are things, if you have the right back-end access and the right APIs, you can do all of those types of things. So yes, we wanted to take action. So Emily's team is doing that. Then we have our IT team, and they're really the ones that are kind of our Salesforce admins for our org. And they are the ones that are going and implementing the integrations and things like that. But it's an important point, because what you saw in the demo and what Emily talked about with the instructions, that is being done by the business, not by IT. And so that's a really key point. It's really empowering. It allows us to go a whole lot faster. Our IT team is really focused on ingestion of new data and integrations and other types of capabilities, APIs we need, things like that, kind of the plumbing aspects. But the experience aspects, kind of how I think about it, that really sits with Emily and team in the business.
Great. Thank you, Jim. So, Emily, I've got a measurement question for you. So how do you measure resolution rate?
Yeah, resolution rate looks at the number of conversations where there was no escalation to a human divided by the total conversations. So what we're really looking for there is that back and forth, right? People have entered the conversation. We don't see an abandon. And ultimately, regardless of turns, don't escalate to a human. And that helps us understand more deeply at scale how often our customers self-serving. Now, the sort of inverse of that is that escalation rate. And as Jim mentioned, early on, we were reading every transcript that came through, and now we've gotten more sophisticated in our ability to kind of slice and dice the outcomes. So those escalation ones are where we spend the bulk of our time. That's where we spend most of the PMs on my team will spend time reviewing those conversations that did result in an escalation to a human and trying to understand why. Now, the interesting thing that we do see, just to add some context, is oftentimes Agentforce does a great job at answering questions, right? So customer comes to us, they have a complex question. As you saw today in our 3-turn experience, we also see 6 and 7 turns. It's back and forth, back and forth. And a lot of times we do see very high quality answers that still result in someone wanting to talk to a human. So that's where we start to understand not just the answer quality, but what is the other piece? What is the action that they wanted to take? Or what was their ultimate goal in asking these questions? And keep working away at the experience so that we can bring that escalation number down.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. So I've got another question for you, Jim. Is there a way for Agentforce to give different responses based on their role? So if you're an admin, for example, do you get a different response?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's this whole area of personalization, which we're kind of just getting started on. And so I saw a few other questions kind of tied to this in the questions submitted as well. You have access to personalize based on any of the data in Salesforce or in your data cloud instance. And so that could certainly be if I know the role of somebody, because when they signed up for a Salesforce account, I captured their role. It could be based on entitlement. If I know what success plan they have, I could do different things and offer different things. For example, one of the things that we have in our instance of Data Cloud is we know people's status on Trailhead. So we know their badges, we know if they're a ranger, all of those types of things. And so things you could do very easily there to personalize, which we're working towards, are things like congratulating somebody in part of the conversation if they just earned a badge on Trailhead. That's a pretty cool experience. We think about, our customers expect us to know everything about them that we should without being creepy. And the way we really, light that up is by getting all the data that's relevant to our customers into Data Cloud. And that's all at our disposal when it comes to the agent interaction. And so we can certainly personalize, again, based on any of those parameters. We can route based on those parameters. If we wanted to say, hey, I want to send, this person has 20 certifications on Salesforce, I want to send them to somebody different through Omni routing, that data can be passed and route that way. But again, I can also personalize any of the interactions based on what I know about the person. So.
Excellent. So we're coming up to time. So last question for you both. If you could give one piece of advice to a team, company that's just beginning to explore AI, what would that be?
Emily, you can start.
Yeah. From my perspective, as we worked to get this technology live and in front of customers, the piece that has served us very well is experimentation. So very early on, we gave our PMs access in a dev environment to build an agent, start playing with prompts, and really get their hands dirty. I think a lot of times there is this anxiety around a new technology and the non-deterministic nature of it. Well, I can't perfectly control what the customer experience is going to be like. It's not a chatbot. There's no dialogue tree. And I would say one of the crucial learnings is really just to enable your team to start playing. You saw Agent Builder. It's fairly intuitive to just go in there, start adding instructions, start running through queries, and really see how it works. For us, we started the live experience for customers in a pretty small scale. We had about 10% of customers flowing through this. And what that did is it gave our team the ability to read every single transcript and have that confirmation and say, oh, we are really seeing very solid performance out of this technology, and that allowed us to scale. So I think that approach of experimentation, willingness to try, to iterate is something that has served our team very well. And I think for folks who are starting on this journey, the sooner you get there, even if it's just in a sandbox and you hand it out to a core crew of internal team members to start just putting it through the ringer, you can learn so much so quickly by the willingness to just get started.
Yeah, I was actually going to echo the same thing. Just get started is really the key. About a month and a half ago, we had a meeting in San Francisco with about 500 of our top executives, and we spent 3 hours. And if you can believe it, in that 3-hour period, all of our top executives in the company were building agents. So if we can do it, if I can do it, you can certainly do it. And so that is really the key, is just to start with it. It's not that hard. If you're using things like Salesforce knowledge and service, as an example, you've already got a base of content, you've already got data, start playing with it. And you'll be amazed at how good the answers are. One of the things that we didn't talk about earlier on resolution rate is that even though there's some anxiety to turn things over to an agent versus a human, our humans are not perfect either, right? The resolution rate of our humans is in that range of where our agents are. So in just a few months, our agents are as prolific as our humans. And that's not a knock on our humans. Our humans are amazing, but the agents are as prolific at answering questions as our humans. Now, there's still that 15% that are the really hard, gnarly questions that require a lot of collaboration. And that'll always be the case. But just get started. And you'll be, like Emily said, you'll be really amazed. We have been at how great the responses are and the tech is. Now, it's not magic. So don't make that mistake that it's magic. You have to have the content. Emily went through the 6 things that we've learned. I'm sure there'll be a 7th and 8th before long. You got to load up the content. You have to write some instructions, but just start experimenting and you'll be able to tune those instructions as you read the transcript. So really think about a way that you can experiment and get a little bit of volume through an agent, whether it's a customer facing agent or an employee facing agent. Just get some volume through it. And I think you'll be surprised yourself at how strong the tech is. And then I think when you show the results to your manager or your executives, they'll have a lot of support because they'll realize this is not just a cost play, this is an experience play. And I think the tech is just getting started. Just to kind of try to wrap in a few other questions I saw in there. Right now it's just chat, but you're going to see other channels show up, whether that's SMS or voice. Other channels are coming, languages, all these types of things are going to be possible in the future. So it is really going to deliver a better experience for customers and help you scale your costs. So the best way to get started is just to begin those experiments now and just know that we are here to help you.
Perfect. Thank you both so much. So now, if anyone has any follow-up questions or need additional information, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. We'll be diving into how we've iterated on the transformation based on new insights that's coming up in the next few months. So have a great day, everyone, and see you next time.